Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Sister Sesh podcast. It's your host, Kat. You know what that means. I have a special guest today because my sister's out living her best life. So I have Therese Bauer, and she is a cannabis lifestyle coach. She teaches us how to use cannabis in our day to day life and the healing properties of the plant. We've been discussing more here on the podcast about how we can heal our minds, our body, our soul with cannabis, and not just, be two little slugs on the couch. So, Therese, let us know, for those who don't know, your background and everything.
Yeah, for sure. So I came into cannabis about 14 years ago, 2010,
Hmm.
because I was dealing with some health issues. And I grew up in a religious cult. And so cannabis was the farthest thing away from anything that we would consume. We didn't go to movies or use playing cards, or we were quite separate from the world. And I left when I was
Oh,
17 and then just started exploring about life. And it wasn't until 14 years ago when my daughter had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I was struggling as a caregiver. I was struggling with sleep and anxiety and caring for her, and I was up a lot at night with her. And I just had this calling, like cannabis knocked on my door, literally, and was like, you need to try me. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about this plant. I was in a community there where cannabis was quite widely used recreationally. And
oh,
so I thought,
wow.
let's give it a try. And so I did. I had
Yeah.
my first joint. And that night we'd put the kids to bed and we went out to the garden, sat in the hammock, and I lit my first joint with my husband. And it was that moment that I was like, wow, why has this been hidden from me my whole life? I instantly felt relief. I instantly felt calmness in my body, and I slept so well that night. And so that was the start of my journey of exploring cannabis in a medical way, in a therapeutic way, to help with healing within our bodies. And then it kind of emerged from there. And I kept studying cannabis. And it was my son when so this was maybe about 10, no, not quite 10 years, maybe 6 years later. He was diagnosed with Lyme disease when he was 14. And he was bedridden throughout his teen years, just severe pain. And when he was 16, he came to me and said, hey, would cannabis help me, Mom? And I was like, I don't know. You're a young
Yeah.
adult. Let's see. And so we explored it, and we found a pediatrician who would prescribe it for him, and it made a world of difference. He's alive today. He's 21. I believe he's alive today because of cannabis and how it kept him, helped him to sleep, helped him to relieve his pain, stabilize his mood, and just have a little bit more passion for staying alive. Because at 16, 17, you're in bed, you have no peer experience, like you're pretty
Yeah.
isolated.
So, like, how did you navigate that conversation? Because, as a cannabis mom, it's different to have those. Like, for me, I have small children. They're 2 and 5, and I'm not going to. I'm very little like ask less of my consumption. Like I don't do it in front of them, but I don't hide it either. So I just so my son knows like, hey, mom's gonna go outside for like 5 minutes, have a quick break. She can come back. She's gonna be great. She's gonna be fun again. She's not gonna be yelling. She's not gonna be stressed. But to have those open communications with your children, like, how did that conversation go?
Yeah, well, I was a closet consumer, and
Mm-hmm.
my son being 16, my daughter was 8. No, he was 16. She was, I think, about 18 at the time. I wasn't really public with them about it. I was hiding, and it happened that I was listening to a podcast about cannabis, and then so it was my son who came to me and said, "Hey, I just heard what you were taught, what you were listening to. Is it something that would help me?" So he approached me. Now, I would do it a little bit differently because I am out of the closet and I'm open with my consumption. We have a younger son, and he's known about cannabis much longer, of course,
Yeah, it's
because it's
pretty much
part of
his
our
whole
family.
life. Yeah, it's very just
Yes,
normal. Yeah.
yes. hmm Um, can I just put a little, I have some colleagues here in Canada that just released a course called How to Speak to Your Kids About Cannabis.
Oh, that's
And
lovely.
so I'd
We
say,
will, if you will share it, yes, we will link it down in our show notes for everybody. It's a great thing, because for parents, they get very stigmatized too. It's like, well, like especially as moms, and just in motherhood, you people forget that you used to be a woman. You used to be a young woman. You used to, whatever stage of motherhood you're in, you used to be fun. And people, and I'm not saying motherhood isn't fun. It has its rewards. It has its challenges. I go, the plan is just there to help us be one in tune and present with our children. It's kind of, I use it
Why
as a
isn't
tool. Yeah.
yes, why is wine o'clock okay for moms?
Exactly. Or, why is that cigarette break okay? And things like that. So, um, it's kind of one or the other. And so I love that we're able to have those guides because I think my listeners will be very in tune with just wanting to know more about the plant and how it just is. Because Alicia and I, we've come across it very drug addicts as parents. So for us, it was like, no, we don't want this at all. And we don't want to touch anything at all. But cannabis was very just destigmatized in general. It was like, you could do this, but I don't want you doing any other drug than this. uh,
Mm.
and that was kind of how we were taught, like then the normalization of it. And it was just like, don't do it in my house. You could do some, go for a walk, like, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and we are changing that stigma for sure because we're starting to see the medical aspects of cannabis and how it can help us in all different ages and stages.
So, can you explain to us how cannabis can relieve those ailments in you, if you've experienced those in yourselves, changes that you've seen in loved ones and patients?
Yeah, yeah. Have you talked much about the endocannabinoid system?
No, not a lot of people know. Alicia, I've been educating my sister, and she's like, because we're about to take a tolerance break. Myself, I'm about to take a tolerance, and I feel that those are very um yeah, actual things that we need to do. And I was explaining to her, I'm like, there's a science behind it. There's people that literally, that's their whole life is to teach them. And I feel like you guys are the trailblazers to where we are today in the industry. Like we haven't
Yeah.
been able, we've moved so far in the industry that I feel like, but it took those steps, took those influential people, it took those people to be like, no, I want a second opinion.
Totally. So I want to answer your question about how it can help us with things like anxiety and pain and sleep. But I want to talk about the endocannabinoid system first, because if we
Mhm.
understand how it works within our body, it makes a whole lot more sense why we would reach for it. So we have a system in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system, or ECS. So I'll refer to it as ECS because it's just a little bit less of a
Easier.
mouthful.
Yep.
And this system is as important to our bodies as the cardiovascular system or the skeletal system. It's just that it wasn't diagnosed or it wasn't discovered until the late 90s. Early 90s, a couple of decades. Either way, it wasn't discovered that long ago. And so our medical systems are not well versed on it. We are learning first. And so we're taking it to our medical community and saying, hey, you need to look at this system. And the reason it's so important is because the endocannabinoid system is like the master regulator for the entire body. It wants to bring all the other systems in the body back to balance. So if you are experiencing an imbalance in another system in your body, generally when we go to the doctor, they just address that system. But if we look to the ECS first and go, where are my imbalances within my ECS? And look to that first. And then that can help us to manage the rest of the systems in our body. It's way more successful. So the ECS
Mhm.
wants to bring balance and homeostasis into the body because there's different receptors within the body that cannabinoids can bind to. So why do we have cannabinoid receptors within our body? Is because we make cannabinoids in our body. They're called endocannabinoids. And so their purpose is to help bring that homeostasis and that balance. There's two main endocannabinoids that we make, and there's probably more going to be discovered, but the two main ones that we know about are 2-AG and anandamide. Anandamide in Sanskrit, so another language, means bliss.
Ooh, it's
We are
that good
supposed to be
feeling.
has that good feeling. We're
Yes, that
supposed
when
to
you spark
create.
up that good feeling, that dopamine fix that you kind of get. That's why when we have it, we have long periods of time when we consume, we feel very anxious or irritated. Our mood changes, and that's just our system telling you like, hey, I need to go smoke. Because if you're most cannabis users, consumers, they consume throughout the day, daily, multiple times a day. So that's where that makes sense.
But we're supposed to not need cannabis, right? We're supposed to be able to regulate this on our own with anandamide because our body creates anandamide. But as we know, through our environment and through our lifestyles, we are causing deficiencies within our endocannabinoid system, and we're not creating enough anandamide. So we're not reaching that blissful state on our own very often. And so this is where we can reach to cannabis, because THC and CBD, these cannabinoids, bind into the same receptors that anandamide and 2-AG bind into. And so we can look to cannabis as a supplement. So sometimes we call it the vitamin weed. There's a book called Vitamin Weed by Michelle
Ooh,
Ross.
what a good read.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yes, we consume cannabis for recreationally because we want to feel good. Feeling good is actually wellness and health in our bodies. We're naturally supposed to be feeling good beings. And so THC and CBD bind into these receptors, and they do the same thing that anandamide would do: go up to the brain, give those signals of balance and homeostasis and feeling good, that extra dopamine, just those
Hmm.
feel good things. And in the meantime, it's also changing our perception of pain. So it can reduce pain perception. It's also it possibly could be lowering our heart rate, lowering that anxious response, bringing calmness and ease into the body. Sleep, helping us to shut down. Sometimes we get stuck in loops of thinking, overthinking at night, and the brain doesn't
Yes.
stop thinking.
There are times where I'm
Cannabis,
like, all right, I need to consume. I was like, okay, the kids are in
yes,
bed, things are done. Um, but my mind races, especially we talk a lot here about mental health, and I have a mental illness called schizoaffective disorder. So if you're aware of it, it's a mood disorder, bipolar, and schizophrenia. So I do have those like auditory hallucinations, and my mind races and things. So when I consume cannabis, those hallucinations are gone. Like it's like the best way I could tell everyone and explain to people, it's like a radio in my head. It's constantly going. It's just static background noise constantly going. So when it becomes quiet, when my mind is quiet, it's like the most centering, peaceful. Yeah, it's very peaceful. uh, but that's the way we can use cannabis in our wellness, though, and people don't realize that those little sparks or those little any which way you consume. I just introduced my husband to cannabis, and we experimented with different consumption. So he's like, I'm not a smoker, I don't like that. So I was like, okay, well, edibles are his jam. And he works he's worked labor jobs his whole entire life, so your body breaks down, your body aches out. So there are times where he's like, all right, it's weekend, I know I gotta go back to work tomorrow. I'm just gonna eat my cookie and I'm gonna hang out with you and the kids. And I was like, that is fine.
yeah, very good. That's a great way of utilizing it for well-being, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the tolerance? I have some more perspective to share on
Yes.
tolerance.
Yes,
Okay.
because
All right.
I'm really fixing to go on a tolerance break. I've been consuming cannabis since March. I reintegrated it back into my life with some healthy boundaries, and everything. And I have time and places. I literally have a timer that goes off. It'd be like, all right, today this is the time that you can consume. These are the times you don't consume. I have a very healthy balance about, and I feel like I needed that because I used to become I was a opioid addict, um, and I've been very exposed to that my entire life. So having mindful consumption and knowing, okay, when is the time to take a break? Because your body has to reset. That's also what a lot of people don't realize, is that just like you reset your house, the way you reset your home, you think you got to reset your mind, you got to reset your body.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so what's happening, I'll explain a little bit about what's happening when we need to take a tolerance break, is remember those receptors that I talked about in the endocannabinoid system. When THC binds into those receptors over a long period of time, it can start to build up. So let's say the receptor is like this, and normally it's nice and empty and clear. THC comes in, settles into the receptor, and all is good. But
Yeah.
over time and higher consumption, this receptor starts to just get plugged with THC. And then you need more and more THC to get the same effects.
Yes.
But you can take a break, take a tolerance break, allow those receptors to clear again. Sometimes it's a couple of days, sometimes a couple of weeks. Everybody's a little bit different. You got to find what's going to work for you.
Yeah. And even
And
with
then
a
once,
tolerance break, it doesn't mean to completely go cold turkey. I go cold turkey because that's just the way I do it. I'm not advocating if don't not stop taking your medicine if you need it. You see, but you can also cut back on. Okay, if you consume in the morning and you consume at lunch and you consume before dinner, that lunchtime sesh is not needed. That once in the morning with your coffee and after dinner go to bed, like that's a healthier way if you're using it like holistically and for your wealth.
because it's really hard. I'm taking cannabis nightly to sleep. If I don't take it one night, I ain't sleeping.
Yeah.
So instead of eliminating it completely, I will add CBD. So on that, that lunchtime where you normally are consuming, add CBD in. So
Oh,
take
okay.
CBD
See.
instead. CBD does not build a tolerance, and it helps to modulate THC as well. So when we have the receptors again, THC comes into the receptor, and then CBD comes. Will only come into a receptor that has THC in it. So interesting enough, some people say, I don't want any THC with my CBD. Well, that's fine, but it won't go into the receptors in the
Yeah.
endocannabinoid system. They need to be paired together. So when CBD comes in, it clears out some of that THC from those receptors on its own. So a lot of people will find that they don't need tolerance breaks at all because CBD is helping them modulate those receptors already. There's another way though, if you're like, no, I don't want to work with CBD, I only want THC. A tolerance break can also be considered, or changing your tolerance can also help with changing your strain or your method of ingestion as
Oh,
well.
yes, yes. Because there are times where Alicia and I, when she comes to visit, I'm just like, we're eating edibles. She goes, what do you mean? I was like, we're just gonna eat these cookies and we're just gonna have a family fun night. And she's like, all right. And she's like, because for some people, the way you consume, I'm an avid smoker. Because we know that when we inhale it, it's fast acting. It activates that way. For most people who want a long lasting for their ailments, their body, I found that like when you ingest it, it lasts longer. So I use that's kind of how I switch up my consumption too, because that way I'm not out. I'm still present with my children. We're still out and about. My anxiety level is the where it needs to be, but I'm not constantly thinking about when's that next time I have to smoke.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a really great way. Edibles are awesome in that way. Just take it in
Yeah.
the morning and you're good for a good part of the day, or
You're
for the
good
night.
until
Take it
like
at night.
4 o'clock if you take it. Yep,
Yes.
I've taken one at 8 o'clock in the morning. Had made breakfast. I didn't have to consume until like 6 o'clock that day because I was like, all right, I'm cool. I'm fine.
Yeah, it's a great way.
So, can you explain to me how you turned your struggles of and message like into this whole big platform and really a business?
Yeah, yeah. So I was just seeing so much success in my own being. So I developed through the caregiving of my daughter. I developed autoimmune disease myself, chronic fatigue syndrome, and so I've had great results. There isn't a cure for chronic fatigue syndrome, and it can be hard to manage. But cannabis really, really helped me manage my insomnia, manage my fatigue, and so as I was consuming, and then we took the journey of my son consuming for medical purposes, and then it started to reach out to my family, my extended family, and started to see the benefits that I was helping them to receive pain relief and sleep and anxiety. And then, so I'm here in Canada, in BC, Canada. Legalization of cannabis for recreational and medical, well, medical was years ago, but for like access to cannabis was legalized in 2018 in October. And it was at that point that
Wow.
I was like, I have like a number of years experience working with this plant. I've developed this relationship with this plant and I really want to share it. And at the time, you were a grower or a retail store. Like there wasn't a lot of options
No,
of how to be in the cannabis space.
no,
And
because
so as I began to,
yeah, even here in the United States, it's still stigmatized. I know that our government is working to get it federally legal, but we're working on it. It's gonna take us some time, but yeah,
it's
it's
coming.
coming. I feel like in the next 5 years it will be here. The green motion will get here, but I feel like Canada has come a long way in understanding the plant in general. Just being like, all right, this is what our citizens want, we might as well get educated. And they really did. Like,
We're working on it.
yeah. Yeah. I think
Mhm.
everyone's working on it, but I think as the
Yeah.
more we educate, um, and like I said, the industry has come very far away. So how did you like navigate, okay, so you have this experience, you're working with the plant, legalization is just around the corner. Like that is your time to move, right? You got to go where it
Yes,
booms. So how
that's right.
was
Yeah.
that transition for you?
Yeah. At first, I didn't know what I wanted to do because I didn't know what's available in the industry. So it took me a bit of time
Yeah.
to do some research. And then I found the Cannabis Coaching Institute out of Boulder, Colorado in January of 2020. And I started working with that course. So I took a year-long coaching program where we went through the science of cannabis. And I learned so much more in addition to what I'd already been learning about cannabis, learned about coaching, learned about educating. And then I kind of took it from there and made my own spin to it. So I've been working one-on-one with clients. I've also had a speakeasy women's cannabis club where women get together monthly on Zoom and we talk about cannabis, growing it, using it medicinally,
Oh,
just all
that's
the questions, doing
lovely.
DIY. Yeah,
Yeah,
so fun, so fun.
that that sounds like
And
a great get together of just like-minded women, because even for us women it's hard to get together and to really cultivate those relationships, and I just love that for y'all.
yeah. And then I started teaching at our local college. So I do in-person classes on how to make your own oils, how to make your own salve, and then a full day course on all about cannabis and dosing and introductions. So that's been amazing that our college has been open to talking about cannabis and educating a community. And then I've just been keeping evolving from there, moving into more public speaking opportunities to speak on a more mainstream stage of people who are like, "Oh, what?
What is
What are you
this?
talking about?"
Yeah, why
Yes,
why
yeah,
should we legalize this plant? I know for America's history, we used to have cannabis. We used to grow hemp very heavily. It was one of
yep,
like the second like agricultural benefit, and then the 60s came. Yeah, the 60s came, but it was a time for other issues to be dealt with, so I understand why cannabis had to be back on the back burner. But I feel
yeah.
like in the recent years though that we've been able to like evolve and landscape cannabis wellness. There's more positions in the space, because there's cannabis nursing coaches like you who go into and have clientele and really educate. So in your opinion, what are some exciting developments and trends that you foresee in the future when it comes to cannabis wellness?
So our seniors are the fastest growing population of cannabis consumers right now, new to cannabis
Our
or
grandmas are
coming
getting
back.
high. The grandmas are
Yes.
getting, yes, that's wonderful.
And it's because they talk about things, right? And they
Yeah.
share things. And somebody comes across an edible and they get a good night's sleep and then they pass it over to their neighbor. And so we're starting to reassess these stigmas and taboos that we've grown up with. So that's really interesting to see. The seniors are going to be leading the way. And that means they're also going to lead the way in our medical communities because they hopefully will stand up and demand it as opposed to because our doctors here in Canada still won't talk about cannabis. Majority of our
Same here in the
doctors.
United States. They still won't. I have a My grandmother was paralyzed from the waist down. She had only the right side of her body moved, so she could move her right hand and her right leg. And I remember we used to have this big jug of oil and it had the cannabis stem from like when you grow, like the big stem that grows in the middle of the plant in there, and it was infused. My uncles used to go every couple like of years and go to TJ to go buy it. They would go to the border to go buy this for her because her ailments were so bad. Her body was swelling. When you're paralyzed like that, your arthritis, everything kicks in. So I remember being a young child. She's like, rub this oil on me. I didn't know what it was. I was just like, all right, well, it makes grandma feel great. But you can see, I could understand why they would come to their doctors and be like, okay, I am taking every pharmaceutical thing in the sun, and I still don't feel great. I feel like the older generations are starting to be more in tune with our younger generation. They're kind of starting to ask questions like, all right. So and it's us youngsters that are going to be like, grandma, have you tried this? Have you tried this? It works for us.
Mhm, mhm. Yes, yeah. So that's exciting to see them be the movers and the shakers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. So have you seen like big turnarounds in your senior clients? Like what have they, because at first they some might be spectacle, at first be like, oh, I don't know. This is stuff my grandson does. Right? So like, so how do you navigate those conversations as to be like, okay, well, this is something that I would advocate for you if this is something you're interested in. Like, do you walk your clients through the first time they consume?
Yeah, so a lot of my seniors come to me through talks that I do. So I do a lot of
Mhm.
seniors talks in seniors groups and elder colleges and things like that. And so that's where I give them the basis and we talk about the plant and the endocannabinoid system and the cannabinoid. So we talk about the science part of it. So seniors love that, right? Like they want to, like we don't use slang words. So we're using medical terms and
Yeah.
we're getting that, just that smooth landing for them. And then if they're ready to take it further, then they connect with me and I go through just more identifying the method of consumption, their starting dose. So sometimes I will walk them through their first dose, but a lot of them tend to just do that on their own. And I will, explain what to do. But then a lot of people too start with oils, and so all you
Oh,
have to do is
yeah.
like it's pretty simple. Not
Yeah.
many of my
Starting out
seniors are
small.
using information. Yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah,
I would
or
think that
even
they would just and pinpoint certain ailments at that point. And oils are great. People underestimate oils. Like if you have you ever taken an oil infused bubble bath? Oh, those are so great. Your whole body just feels really nice. But if you're not like, because for some people they do freak out. Like have had experiences where I was like, I've been with someone who it's their first time consumptionally, even medically, and it was like they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, it's okay. I remember when I got cleared for my mental illnesses, I was able to go in, and I had a friend who was she had an autoimmune disease, and she's like so excited. She's like, we're going to go to the clinic and I'm going to take you for the first time. And she was just really excited because it was like, she goes, I didn't know what to expect because in certain states here, you can't even touch the plant. You can't
yeah,
even you
yep,
can't smell it, you can't touch it. So in California, this was back in 2017. I walked in, I gave him my I think I go out and I look around and I was like, this is legal, right? And she's like, yes, this is legal. I was like, I'm not gonna get in trouble, right? And she's like, yeah, you passed the door, you passed the big guy at the door, you're good. And so I went to the bud tender and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. She goes, what? I was like, I have really bad anxiety. Like, I'm surprised I'm here right now. And she's like, okay, that's a good place to start. And she walked you through it. And my friend was just really excited. She was like, because when we went to one where I could touch everything, I can smell the plant, I can see everything, and it was a great experience. But for some people who don't have that person in their corner, it could be a little scary. Some people don't have a great experience. So, have you ever
yeah.
had someone not have a great experience? And you're like, just
I usually prep, so they'll come to me after they have a bad experience. They don't come to me and then have a bad experience
oh yeah,
because I teach them how to not have a bad experience.
yeah,
So usually I'm doing what somebody's already done, and uh, and then just you're just reminding them that we can do this in a safe way. We don't have to be high. We don't have to have this discomfort by following these guidelines and these safety pieces.
Alrighty. Can you share some specific experiences or success stories of your clients who have used it for CBD for like anxiety and sleep?
Okay, so for anxiety, yes, I had a client who was struggling with anxiety in family situations, or like being out with a family in restaurants, and
Yeah,
just noise, outside noises, and just the commotion and all
I'm
of
the
that.
same way. I can't handle crowded places. I get very overwhelmed, and then somebody talks to me, and I just flip out. I'm like, there's just too much going on here. Because
Yeah,
for a lot of people, they don't realize when you have anxiety, you're processing a lot of things all at once.
that's right. Lots of stimuli
And I'm
coming in.
like, yeah. And so they're like, and you have racing thoughts. So your brain's going a mile a minute. Either your surroundings are going a mile a minute. So it's hard for you to center yourself when you're like in those moments.
Yeah, yeah, and so she had packed some cannabis with her and then left it in the car, and in a pen, in a vaporizer. So she was consuming
Like
it through
this. Yep.
inhalation. Yeah,
Like a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
vaporizer. Yep.
exactly. Right. Yeah. And so she just excused herself and went out to the car, took a couple of puffs, took a deep breath, went back in, and showed up a new person. And she was sharing that she could like have conversations and was actually like engaging with the family at the table and could eat the meal that was ordered, and just all of that. Like that's yes, that stimuli input just started to calm down, and just the weight of anxiety lifted so that she could be present. And so that was a routine that she utilized often in other situations. So she didn't consume, at that point, didn't consume cannabis or CBD on a regular daily basis. It was more as needed. So when situations would come up, then she would reach for
Well,
cannabis.
yeah, that's the same as taking like an anxiety med that it needed, like but this time you just, and I feel like this is the way I consume with the vapor because I feel like it's more convenient in a sense of I don't have to worry about like I have when I for my flower and stuff we have it in a lockbox up safe where the children can't get it because we feel that that's a crucial thing when having it in the house, but I feel like I don't have to go through that whole process of getting that box down. That's when they go to bed. You know what I mean? I feel like okay, I can go for a walk for 5 minutes, come back, I can go use the bathroom, like, um, and but
Yeah, it is.
people don't realize how calming it is, to have that sense of relief.
Mhm.
And now that you've shifted and had all this experience in your practice, can you explain to us like that pinnacle moment when you realized cannabis is like a very spiritual thing? Like consuming
Yeah,
is so spiritual. I've had those moments where I'm just like I've sat outside when it's snowing and it's 30-degree weather and I'm like this is so cool. Like I feel so good with myself. I feel like I love myself. Like I'm in tune with my body and my soul. And like, can you explain to us like
yeah,
that pinnacle moment you when you discovered that? I think it's a beautiful moment. If
yeah.
anybody hasn't experienced that, you need to arrange a sesh to have that experience.
It might have actually been my very first experience, except I didn't
um,
identify it as a spiritual experience. But now looking back, it totally was, because the peacefulness and calmness that came into my body. I was laying in the hammock, and the hammock was swaying, and I was looking up into the stars. It was a beautiful dark night out with the stars twinkling. And it was at that moment that I was just like, wow, like I don't need the me, right? The me of pain and of anxiety just kind of vanished, and I was just there. I was just there with the universe and being with the stars. And so that probably was my very first experience. And then later on, as I continued to consume and continued to have experiences, my consumption at night was for sleep. But it
yeah.
started to be that cannabis would be like, hey, before you go to sleep, I have something to tell you. And I would start to get these downloads and have insights from the divine. And that was just like, wow, this is so accessible. To be able to have this deep connection with the divine and to have this peacefulness within my body. And so just recently, in solstice, actually, just before Christmas, I hosted my first cannabis ceremony. So a sacred cannabis ceremony for women.
How beautiful is that?
And so we consumed together in a really sacred way. We made a little womb room where everyone had cushions and blankets. And we meditated together and we shared our experiences. And that intention can be so deeply healing. And so my
Yes.
next one is this Friday. And then I'm
Oh, how
doing an all gender.
exciting. How exciting. I remember that experience for me. It was just recently. I had a friend of mine and we went over to her house and I was going to help her with something. And we could sumo with there. And at the same time, she's like, before we do this, I've been doing this really unique breathing exercise that I've been working on. And it was like, you hold it in thing. And we did this like whole 30-minute like deep breathing exercise. And she's like, okay, now let's go smoke. And I was like, why? She goes, just trust me. Just trust me. Don't even think about it. Just let's go. And sure enough, after I was like, oh, I feel so good. Like I went home and I was like, I feel so great. Like I feel so good with my, like I didn't know how to feel. I just felt some sense of euphoria that just stuck with me. And so I implement that sometimes when I have those really stressed out days where I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna do that deep breathing exercise. And it was really nice because it was like my mind was quiet, everything was at ease. And when you feel things from, you could feel the energy within the earth. And like, I don't know. A lot of people are just don't get to experience that often. Like if you could just slow down. Um,
Absolutely. Yes. So I'm working at offering these ceremonies virtually as well, so that you create your own space and then we join together and guide you through that whole consumption, intention, meditation, and just, yeah, deep essence within the earth and how the cannabis plant leads us there.
oh, thank you so much for joining us today and teaching us about, how to be very intentional with our consumption and how it's very good and mindful for our soul. Um, so I'm really excited. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
You are welcome, and it's my pleasure. I love speaking about cannabis in a good way.
Thank you so much. And if you want any of Therese's guides or anything, I will list it in the show notes below and you can stay connected with her all on social media. And we're just really honored to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.